I want to get your spin on this situation, but on practice this past Wednesday, I know Jalen threw 16 passes, but it seemed like a lot of the immediate and first reads on those throws, not just the checkdowns after the first or second read isn't there, and Hurts is kind of scrambling around on something that might have been, a sack or tucks the ball and runs in a real game setting. But it seemed like there was a lot of throws underneath right away, whether that was, you saw Kenny Gainwell lining up in the slot a lot during practice over these last 2 weeks. And that's something that Nick Sirianni really deployed at times in 2021. And I am a fan of that, I guess you could say 21 personnel. I think the Eagles can make greater use of that, both in terms of running the ball and passing the ball, given the skill set of Jalen Hurts. And I looked at the way that during the Lamar Jackson era, the way that the Ravens have deployed 21 personnel with them.
Yeah, you're picking that Birds 365 guys rolling on a football Friday. McMullen and McDonald, joined by a first-time guest. Looking forward to having him on the show going forward. Good enough to hop on with us here today. Shamus Clancy, who writes basically everything for the guys over at PhillyVoice.com, but had Eagle duty this week filling in for our buddy Jimmy Kempty. Did McMullen treat you okay at your couple of Eagle outings this week, Shamus?
Everyone was very welcoming of me, kind of a baptism by fire, I guess you would say, over the last 2 weeks, going down there and, filling in as a beat writer, even though I do kind of a jack of all trades, a bunch of different stuff.
Yeah, overall, it's a motley crew, Shamus.
Good crew, fun crew.
Yeah. Jimmy's globetrotting, by the way. Jimmy was in Rome.
Oh, he's in Birmingham watching Shookus quarterback. What the hell's he doing if he's not covering the Eagles?
Case Cookers. Well, he got a little bit of a break, so Shamus got a first-hand look at the Eagles and their two open practices, if you want to call them that. I like to call them sessions. So we'll start there, Shamus. What excited you about the Birds when you got some grass time with Nick Sirianni and the boys?
Well, I think everything that people really want to look at and what I wrote about in my observations over the last 2 weeks is those 7-on-7 sessions. And I like that you said sessions because it's not even a real practice, right? And I'm not trying to be, Dick Vermeil or Ron Jaworski complaining about the good old days of, throwing 10,000 passes in a month and doing all that stuff. But that's the
Dick
real.
Was there, by the way.
He was with Irving Fryer, I believe, right?
Yeah, Irving, Frank LeMaster. Yeah, Irving
that's a
Fryer.
Crew.
Yeah, Barrett was there. Barrett Brooks, our own Barrett Brooks. It was alumni day for the Eagles, but sorry to interrupt. Continue, Shamus. 7-on-7s, yeah. More of a glorified passing drill.
Yeah, it's a passing drill, right? It's not practice. It's a session. It's a manipulated pass rush. Nick Sirianni mentioned the other day, speaking with reporters, that
the devastating bags.
Yeah, you're using the bag like your JV grade school football, doing some drills out there. So I think that's an improvement, but in reality, it's just a simple passing drill. And, the defensive backs aren't going super hard. They can't be super physical. But I thought Jalen looked okay the last two sessions. Had some highs, had some lows. It seemed, I would say, more good than bad. And I would say these are both encouraging performances. Again, it's a glorified passing drill, but it's all we have to go off of, right? We've only seen 2 practices this entire offseason. So you have to have some takes and opinions based on what you saw. I think Jalen threw 16 passes on Wednesday and maybe 12 or 13 the week prior. So we're on the smallest of sample sizes here. But his deep ball, I thought, looked pretty good both last week and this past week. He had a really, really nice throw to Quez Watkins in that deep slot roll. Burnt Devontae Maddox deep. Great route by him. We also had a really nice play from John Hightower this week. I thought John Hightower's practice this week was really, really good. I really like the touch that Jalen Hurts had on the last play of OTAs was a wheel route down the left sideline to Jason Huntley. Really good catch by Jason. Really good route, but it's the perfect little touch on that throw. Something that's not been a part of Jalen's game from what we've seen over the last year and a half. It's sort of the end of the 2020 season and his full season, the 2021 starter. Seems like he's been attacking in the middle of the field a little bit more during these sessions. Again, it's a practice session. There's no pass rush. I think Jalen's a guy who thrives more in a game setting, an 11-on-11 full contact setting, given his mobility, which that kind of attribute to his game is minimized in these settings. So I don't think this is really the full high ceiling, maximal Jalen Hurts that you might be getting in September and October. But I liked his ability to try things that were weaknesses what we've seen over his, 20 or so career starts.
Let me follow up on the last one. You talked about the close out the practice pass to Jason Hunley. Hunley be no higher than the fourth back on the Eagles depth chart as of right now. Everything's fluid, could change, but how big a part is throwing the ball to the backs out of the backfield do you think is going to be of the Eagle offense this year? They want to pass the ball more. That is the safest of passes usually to get it to the back in the backfield. Do the Eagles have enough talent back there in receiving backs to make that a big part of their offense in 2022?
I definitely think so. Miles Sanders is definitely the team's best rusher, but I think he's had some issues with drops over the last couple of years. He was really strong as a rookie in 2019 out of the backfield, I thought, and kind of regressed over the last 2 seasons, had some of those issues with drops. But while the Eagles running back group isn't really high on high-level talent, I think there's a really good depth there and guys who can do a little bit of different things well. I think Boston Scott's really great out of the backfield. Maybe that's only if he's playing in the Meadowlands against the Jets or the Giants, but he's proven there too. And I really love the selection of Kenny Gainwell in last year's draft. He's a guy I didn't even think would be on the Eagles' radar in the sense that he would go earlier than he did in the draft. And I think he's fantastic out of the backfield. I think a lot of those Memphis running backs over the last half dozen or so years that are coming out, Tony Pollard in Dallas, really versatile in their game, not just traditional rushers, but guys who can make plays out of the backfield too. And then you have Huntley there. It's a situation where on some other teams, Huntley might make the roster as the third running back, I think. But in a situation with the Eagles, they have some nice depth there, even though, again, there's no true bell cow running back, even though some Eagles fans really might want that to be Miles Sanders, but it doesn't really seem the case going into his 4th pro season. So I do like what they have back there, but still, I'm really high on Gainwell and what kind of explosion he could have in his second season. I think he had 6 or 7 total touchdowns as a rookie, which he didn't really get a ton of run out there and a ton of snaps and reps, but really maximized his potential whenever he was on the field. So I think it'll be a numbers game where Huntley might not get that ability to be out there during the regular season, but that speaks more so to the versatility that Gainwell and Boston Scott could offer than Huntley himself in a vacuum.
Yeah, you bring up Kenny, Shamus, and it was interesting to me because he had a drop. And I remember somebody was asking me, what was your biggest takeaway from OTAs? And everybody's talking about the touchdowns and the 2 deep balls to Devonta.
The touchdowns, fake touchdowns.
Exactly. The deep balls to Devonta in the first practice, and then, as you mentioned, was Quez and John Hightower in the second one. But I said Kenny Gainwell's drop because he never drops it. So I was shocked. It was a little pass in the flat, and it was good. It was right there, and he dropped it. But I bring that up not to dismiss Kenny because he's such a good receiver. It shocked me, and that's why it stuck out to me. And I do think he's going to be a big part of the offense as the sort of third down, the hurry up back. They're going to use him, and very similar to the start of last year when he was a rookie. But I think people forget Kenny didn't play his final season in college because of COVID. He took the season off. So I think he's going to be a big improvement. We're all talking about A.J. Brown, understandably so, and Devonta and Dallas Goedert. I think Kenny Gainwell's that extra piece as sort of the security blanket to Jalen Hurts. But my question is Jalen the type of quarterback who's going to take that safety valve, or is he so good at running the football and creating things himself that sort of deters that a little bit, that safety valve that can all of a sudden be uncovered and turn into a 20-yard gain or something of that nature?
I want to get your spin on the situation, but on practice this past Wednesday, I know Jalen threw 16 passes, but it seemed like a lot of the immediate and first reads on those throws, not just the checkdowns after the first or second read isn't there, and Hurts is kind of scrambling around on something that might have been, a sack or tucks the ball and runs in a real game setting. But it seemed like there was a lot of throws underneath right away, whether that was, you saw Kenny Gainwell lining up in the slot a lot during practice over these last 2 weeks. And that's something that Nick Sirianni really deployed at times in 2021. And I am a fan of that, I guess you could say 21 personnel. I think the Eagles can make greater use of that, both in terms of running the ball and passing the ball, given the skill set of Jalen Hurts. And I looked at the way that during the Lamar Jackson era, the way that the Ravens have deployed 21 21 personnel with that strength in the backfield they have, on top of obviously Lamar's ability to rush the football. And I don't think Jalen's quite Lamar Jackson, but compared to anyone else in the league, I would say he's in that number 2 slot in terms of productive rushers for a running back, even more so than maybe Kyler Murray, even though he doesn't necessarily touch Kyler's abilities as a passer. But I think Gainwell being out there is something that I would encourage this season, even if it's just not just himself and the lone back out there, but in a situation where there could be multiple backs out there. And I think that I don't know what we're going to see from Jalen. It's his second season in the Nick Sirianni's Shane Steichen system. Shane Steichen continuing to call plays over at the start of the 2022 season. I know that caused a bit of a stir, and fans probably were looking for someone new to blame if something goes wrong in week 1. So they're thinking about that. First 3 and out, Steichen. Get him off the play call and get Sirianni back out there. Or get Brian Johnson, the QB coach, or Kevin out there, Kevin Patullo, to start calling plays. But I'd like to see Jalen do that more. And I think the team, obviously, they love Jalen's ability and his mobility. That's the key to his game, not just talking about as a pure runner, but be able to move around and maneuver in the pocket, roll out, do those sort of things. So the Eagles drafted him because of those abilities. But I think at the same time, I think they'd like to see him run a tad less and be able to hit those touch passes underneath that could be picked. That could be easy 6-7 yard gains for the team as well.
This is something we surely didn't get a look at in the offseason because the Eagles have scaled back as much as they have. That's hurry up offense, no huddle offense. To do that, you have to have a lot of things, tricks in your bag that you have faith are going to work with you. And one of it is you have to believe that the quarterback can negotiate, navigate, and be able to call plays himself in a hurry-up offense. I think dropping in hurry-up offense can be a really good tool to throw another defense off in the middle of a game. Do you think the Eagles have enough faith in Jalen going into his second year as a full-time starter that they will use more hurry-up than they did last year? Because they did not. They used it only when they needed it, when trailing in games. I love it when a team goes no huddle on their second possession of the game and catches the defense off guard. Do you think they got faith that Jalen can pull that off if they use it this year?
Well, I don't necessarily. I think they need to be Chip Kelly week 1, 2013 against Washington on Monday Night Football. But given the speed on this offense, not just Jalen, but in that running back crew we talked about, Devonta Smith, A.J. Brown isn't necessarily a burner, but an athletic marvel at the same time. And Quez Watkins has that ability to get downfield and be a deep passer. Dallas Goedert, physical as well. And obviously, I'd say right now, maybe a top 5, top 6 tight end in this league. The skills there and Jalen's skill set, and I think the intangibles, whenever people talk about, what's a quarterback above the shoulders, and I think that's where maybe Jalen doesn't have the greatest arm in the world. We all know that at this point, but the intangibles and the mobility are really what set him apart as pertains to what the Eagles quarterbacks we've seen over the last decade and a half. So I think those two traits, the intangibles, the mental processing on top of his mobility and legs, lends itself to working well in a hurry-up situation, whether that's just at any point in a quarter or in a 2-minute situation late in the first or second half.
Shamus, want to flip sides of the football with you here. One of the more interesting things I saw on, I'll call it day 2, that we didn't see even day 1. All of a sudden, a couple defensive ends. I saw Derek Barnett. I saw Tyree Jackson, Patrick Johnson, Sam linebackers, Kyron Johnson. They were in 7-on-7s playing linebacker, dropping into coverage. Are we going to get? I think there's a lot of talk about Jonathan Gannon. Obviously, understandably so. People look to Mike Zimmer or Matt Eberflus and say, this is what Jonathan Gannon's going to do. I'm starting to look towards Brandon Staley, who's one of his best friends. They were in each other's weddings. And really, Staley runs sort of the Vic Fangio style of defense. So think Chicago or Denver. Obviously, when he was the head coach, think Green Bay, they run it. Couple other teams. Minnesota's going to run it this year because they have Ed Donatel, who's another one of those guys. Sort of this hybrid 3-4-4-3. Think about players like Khalil Mack, Zadarius Smith, in the Hassan Reddick role. Is that what we're going to see? Do you know what we're going to see? What do you think we're going to see from Jonathan Gannon?
I don't think anyone truly knows what a Jonathan Gannon defense really looks like, that idealized version. Last year, it seemed like he didn't have necessarily the right personnel to do the things that he truly wanted to do. He made the best out of the situation. The Eagles were competent defensively at the least, helped them get to the postseason. Yes, the competition over the last half of the season wasn't too great. I think we can all agree on that. But this year, the personnel is better for him. And I think we talk about Hassan Reddick in that Sam linebacker role, someone who played maybe more straight linebacker during the two open practices that we saw, given that he can't really rush the passer. But versatility is the name of Reddick's game. And I think that's kind of the defining factor of Gannon's defense. It's going to be based on versatility. It's going to be odd man fronts, 4-3, 3-4, things that we haven't even really seen the Eagles run, not just during last season, Gannon's first year in Philadelphia, but really previous before that, because Jim Schwartz had a kind of a traditional, the wide 9-4-3 defense. And this is something different. I think we don't necessarily know what it's going to be yet. And these two practices really can't tell us much when it's just 7-on-7, a glorified offensive drill, more so than anything that we can really have huge takeaways from the defense. So I don't think we really know yet, but the Reddick signing seems to be the greatest sign that Howie Roseman is putting in a position to give Gannon maximize the personnel to allow him to do the scheme and system that he truly wants to do.
All right, Shamus, one of the other things I think the Eagles potentially missed out on this week with the limited amount of time they dedicated to working as a team was mentorship. John and I talk about this all the time, usually about the quarterback position, about the guy in place bringing along the drafted guy underneath him. Is it his responsibility or not? A couple articles I read this week about certainly Jason Kelsey willing to do that with Jordan, his replacement that they drafted in the second round this past year, that he on draft day was very much in favor of, knowing that his reign as Eagles center is not going to go on forever. But they also took Jordan Davis in the first round. And Fletcher Cox is a guy who has been the staple in the Eagles defensive tackle position for a decade now. Will Fletcher play the role of mentor for a guy like Jordan Davis? And did the Eagles, is that one of the things they lose out on by going as short as they do during this prevent injury offseason that they have? They don't have grizzled guys, winners, Super Bowl champions, able to work with some of the guys that will be the Eagles' key players over the next decade.
Yeah, I think the Fletch situation is really intriguing and something that may not be talked about too much. We all know the contract situation, whether he was getting cut and re-signing. That was a little odd this past March, but obviously he's back here in Philadelphia for this year. He's on a one-year contract. He spoke to the media on Wednesday, I believe, kind of addressed that situation, talked about his relationship with Jordan Davis. Last week, Jordan Davis had mentioned that Fletcher Cox was a player that he molded his game off of in his youth, and I'm sure Fletcher Cox feels a little odd saying that someone on his team grew up watching him. But I'd really like to see more of, I'm not saying he hasn't done it. I can't speak to Fletcher Cox's demeanor or role in the locker room, but someone I'd really like to see carry this young defensive tackle group, because I think they really do have four quality players there. I was really high on Milton Williams going into day 2 of the draft in 2021. And I think down the stretch last year, he showcased that he can be a starting caliber defensive tackle in this league. And the expectations for Jordan Davis are sky high, whether it's as the unbelievable run stuffer he was at Georgia or his upside as a pass rusher at the next level. And we had Javon Hargrave, who had sort of a Pro Bowl caliber season. I think teetered off a little bit after a really strong start, but overall played pretty well last season. And Fletcher's the elder statesman, a guy who had been an all-pro in the past, a Super Bowl champion compared to those other three guys. But I wonder how he's going to take a situation where he might not be playing as many snaps as he did throughout his career, if he's not getting quite the same numbers because of him playing less or because Jonathan Gannon's system doesn't necessarily call for him to rush the passer as much as he had done in the past during his peak during the Jim Schwartz era. So I think that's one of the interesting wrinkles we'll see over the next few months in terms of training camp and the preseason, but actually during the season too, and taking the temperature of the team, the defense, and that specific defensive tackles room, because they did mention that they've split up the defensive line system and defensive line coaching to an interior defensive line room and then an outside edge rusher crew. So I think that's something that a situation when you're breaking down into a smaller group. I'd really like to see Fletcher come into a leadership position with those 3 guys under him. I'm not saying that he hasn't done that previously, but I think it would be really welcome, not just for him, but with the future stability of this franchise and for a team that's had talented defensive linemen essentially for the last 2 decades in my time watching the team.
Yeah, and they do, again, as you mentioned, really impressive depth, particularly at defensive tackle. When you start talking about a young emerging player like Milton Williams, and you're going to have difficulty getting him a whole lot of snaps because you have so much depth, and even Brandon Graham can move inside. So he can kind of toggle back and forth. So I want to sort of piggyback off that and talk about depth at other positions. Offensive line really good. That's sort of what the Eagles do. They build up front on both sides of the football. But I got to tell you, Shamus, when, as Fletcher says, people pop their head in during OTAs, they pop their head out. There are certain positions, A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith popped out on Wednesday, and you start to look out there and go, oof, these guys better stay healthy. Safety would be an obvious position. Tight end after Dallas Goedert. What are your concerns when it comes to depth? It's tough to get depth everywhere. Every team in the NFL deals with this. But what positions are your biggest concerns when it comes to depth?
I like that you mentioned the tight end situation because not just during Nick Sirianni's first year in Philadelphia, but during the Doug Peterson era, we saw the Eagles deploy 2 tight end sets that 12 personnel really frequently. And I wonder if that continues this season in the aftermath of Zach Ertz getting traded in the middle of last season. Down the stretch, they still did it a decent amount. They utilized Jack Stoll, an undrafted rookie free agent last year, as a blocker. And I think he has a ways to go to be a pretty good receiver at the pro level, but has illustrated his capabilities as a blocker. And that boded really well for the Eagles when they did that midseason switch to a heavy rushing attack. So I think they were comfortable having him out there doing that. But when you see the changes in the offense this season, you have Devonta Smith going to second year, had a franchise record-breaking rookie wide receiver year last year. You bring in A.J. Brown. You don't bring in A.J. Brown to be blocking cornerbacks downfield. You bring in A.J. Brown to throw the football. And I think having Brown out there leads to a situation where Quez Watkins, who Sirianni's talked up during camp, a situation where he's going to be on the field a lot, whether that's a deep slot guy as the third wide receiver or even a guy like Zach Pascal that Sirianni's bringing him, their relationship stemming from their shared days in Indianapolis with the Colts. So I think you're going to see more 3 wide receiver looks this season, but I'm interested to see if they're still going to be utilizing those 2 tight end looks heavily and what tight ends are going to be out there, whether they're going for Jack Stoll, for a more run-heavy look or someone else that they could use for maybe more passing attack. I know Grant Calcaterra, their undrafted, their 6th-round pick, I believe, that they drafted, shared some time at Oklahoma with Jalen Hurts. I think they'd like to see something from him as a pass catcher. I think the Tyree Jackson injury in Week 18 really hurts them, not just because of the literal injury that befell Tyree, but I think he looked really strong. The team and the organization was very high on him, and seems like the type of guy, given his physical traits, that could have been great as both a blocker and a receiver. And I think if Jackson was healthy throughout camp and these OTA sessions and a training camp in the preseason, it would have been a situation where they were going to work with more 2 tight end sets coming this fall, but I don't necessarily expect that to be immediately. The safety situation, I think that's the biggest question mark on the team overall. Do you really believe in Marcus Epps? That the organization feels high on him? I can't speak to what Marcus Epps is doing on a daily basis to get better and prove himself to be a starting caliber safety in this league. But if the Eagles get beat deep a couple of times in the first couple of games of the season, people and Eagles fans, I'm sure, will be calling for his head and wondering why Howard Roseman didn't address the safety position maybe as much as he could have.
Shamus, I appreciated the fact that coming off the bench, filling in for Kemsky, you stuck to a couple of Jimmy's go-to infos, and that would be hang time on Aaron Sippers' punch. Got to know what the hang time is on those punts. So thank you very much for that as an Eagle fan, not down in practice. Who's going to be catching those punts? Are they going to use assistant coaches in games this year to determine whether the game goes on or not? Like they did at practice the other. Oh, you guys get canceled on Friday because the coach caught a punt. It's one of the spots on the Eagles that I would consider right now a weakness. they don't really have a good punt returner and or kickoff. They have guys who can catch the ball, but they don't have a guy who can make a play at either kickoff punt returner. Are they going with what they have, or do you think that's something that Howie Roseman is still on the lookout for?
Yeah, Michael Clay, the special teams coordinator, spoke with the media last week, and people were kind of, in terms of the media members, trying to get him to see if he could speak as to if someone has a lead as the team's punt returner. That's a situation that was really tough for the Eagles in 2021, and Jalen Reagor goes under the microscope just because of some of the issues he's had on the field in his first 2 NFL seasons as someone who hasn't been a productive receiver compared to the other receivers that were drafted around him in 2020. And then you have a situation where in that playoff game against Tampa Bay, he gets benched given that he can't simply field a punt. And I would say it's unwise, maybe an understatement to say that I don't think any Eagles fans could trust Reagor back there to be the true punt returner. And then you have a situation where Greg Ward was fielding punts. He's kind of just a guy you put back there, not expecting a lot of juice to have him pick up some 15, 20-yard return. You just have him back there in the hopes that he can catch the ball and call a fair catch. But I like someone out there that's a little more lively. Kenny Gainwell was fielding punts on Wednesday. He's not someone who has it, even though his skill set seems tailored fit to be someone who should be an excellent returner, doesn't have a ton of experience there. So I don't know exactly what his mileage is there and whether Michael Clay and the organization is comfortable with him fielding punts back there. But I think the one name that Eagles fans might be into is Britton Covey, the undrafted free agent who's a kind of return specialist and wide receiver. I'm not sure the Eagles would roster him just for the sake returning, because I don't necessarily think they can have a 6 wide receiver who isn't, an NFL caliber receiver. I'm not even just saying a starting or excellent receiver. I'm not sure he could play wide receiver at the next level. He's the guy that would stick out to me, but it's a situation where if he can't provide you anything in the passing game as a rostered wide receiver, I'm not sure the team is going to value that return capability enough to keep him on there. But Kenny Gainwell is a guy, especially if he's just the second or third back in the offense, the guy can make plays with the ball in his hands, and I'd like to see him get a lot of work as a returner in training camp. In an ideal situation, maybe I'll take Jalen Reagor or Greg Ward for that spot. Though maybe, unfortunately, in the eyes of Eagles fans, I think Jalen Reagor, it's going to be Jalen Reagor's job to start the year. And if it's a situation where he can't simply field a ball the first couple of weeks of the season, it might be like the Tampa Bay postseason game back in January where he loses his job fairly quickly.
Yeah, that's not a good position to be in. He is Shamus Clancy. You follow him on Twitter. You see it right there at Shamus_Clancy. PhillyBoys.com, deputy sports editor, filling in for Jimmy Kempski. Not only a great inaugural sort of introduction to the Eagles beat, but here on Birds 365, which is even more important, Shamus, so we appreciate it. But I'll leave you with this. Nick Sirianni, Jody and I talked about it at the top of the show. And the Eagles, and we know Jeffrey Lurie has been very involved as an owner. And that's a good thing for people who don't realize. I talk about all the time what this organization was before Jeffrey Lurie purchased them. It's better than it was. Howie Roseman, we know his reputation. Off-season work, we talk about it all the time. One of 2 teams that didn't have mandatory minicamp, 13 practices available to NFL teams. The Eagles used 6. I've yet to meet the football coach. I say this all the time that doesn't want to practice.
Yeah.
Do you think this is something you keep an eye on down the road? If Nick Sirianni, for instance, keeps winning, do you think he pushes for more power, for more ability to do things? Because this is clearly an organizational decision, not a Nick Sirianni decision, despite him being a good soldier and trying to bend everything on.
I'd obviously like to see the team practice more, not just because of their on-the-field capabilities, just so media members like us could get a greater insight into what's going on this offseason.
Yeah.
But I think I'm at the point where I'm deferring to Nick Sirianni and the organization, giving them the benefit of the doubt, given that they didn't have these really intense practice sessions last year. I know part of that is COVID-related reasoning, but it seemed like they were on the back burner compared to other teams around the league on this situation last year as well. They stayed really healthy in 2021 compared to where they had been the last handful of years. Some really disastrous injury situations in the past few years before that. And I don't think those are necessarily linked because they had extra practices that previous summer. But if the situation where the veterans on the team are comfortable with it, maybe that's the way it has to be. And if it's a situation this upcoming season where, again, the team stays healthy, they improve a little bit over their 9-win season, they win 10, 11 games this upcoming season, I think they're going to have to live with that. And that could be the new norm, not to just take a old Doug Peterson phrase for you, but that could be just nothing the new norm for the Birds. But in a situation that becomes more normalized for the entire league. And I think both fans, media members, and the organization too would like to see more of these younger players, these back of the roster players who are fighting for their football lives in a way. But I guess that doesn't seem like the priority for them at the moment.
All right. My last question, Shamus, is this. When did you take over as deputy sports editor?
My first day was the last day of February this past year. So so about three or so months on the job, right?
Okay, so that's good because it is and it isn't good. I don't have. Well, let me explain.
Yeah.
Philly Voice guy, check it out every single day. Certainly for their Eagle coverage. And last year season starts, and I go there on a Monday, and I go, wait a minute, Kyle Neubeck is writing about the Eagles? What the hell? Neubeck's my Sixer go-to guy. Worked the WIP with me. He's my buddy. He doesn't know diddly squat about the Eagles. And then I read his article. I said, hey, that's not bad. And then the next Sunday came, and he wrote about the game against. Hey, Neubeck knows what he's talking about when it comes to the Eagles. I was going to give you credit for it because I thought he knew nothing about football, but his Monday columns were actually okay. So is Neubeck going to be part of Philly Voice's Eagle coverage again this year?
I can't speak to what's going to happen in the fall, but I've known Kyle.
Oh, come on. You know exactly what the hell's going to happen.
I'm the number now. I'm the number two, not the number one.
Come on.
We have a new.
He's going to defer to Evan Macy.
I don't have the full say just yet, but we also brought on a new sports writer on the website over the last couple of months. His name's Nick Tricombe. He does really great work for us, and I imagine he'll be really involved with our Eagles coverage come the fall, and maybe taking over some of Kyle's roles a little bit, given that we have an extra kind of arm in the bullpen, so to speak.
Okay.
But known Kyle for a long time, kind of going on a decade now as being friends, just in the younger guys in the Philadelphia sports media scene, I guess you could say. But knows his stuff, not just basketball, but all sports, I would say.
Don't use Nick 3 days in a row. That extra arm in the bullpen.
yeah. I'm not going to be Joe Girardi out there working the Philly Voice bullpen. Don't worry.
Feel free to tell Neubeck I said something nice about him. He'll probably fall.
I'll text him after this.
But yes, he actually did a pretty good job with Eagle stuff. I was shocked. I thought he knew nothing about football. But if you use him again this year, I'll be reading him. I'll be reading you. I'll be reading Nick. Whoever you guys throw out there, you do a good job. Thank you very much for hopping on. Now that we know you, now that we've got you in as part of the mix, we're going to be tapping into you more often. Maybe you heard at the top of the show, we got 93 days till first game of the season. How many days till St. Patrick's Day, Shamus?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know quite that. I wasn't a math major, I'll tell you.
Jody's always throwing math
Clancy,
at people.
with a name like that, you got to know how many days to St. Patrick's Day.
I look super Italian because of my mom, so a lot of times people crush me. They're like, I thought your name would have been Vincenzo and your last name ends in a vowel, but I
never know when. People say the same thing to me because of McMullen, and you know, I'm more Scottish, so I mean, I never know when St. Patty's Day is coming up.
I'm checking his Twitter here, and it says, "Okay, grown-ups, it's beer o'clock." So I figure he's going to know when St. Patrick's Day is.
I like a couple beers.
Not an unfair question.
I've had a couple. My two best friends, coincidentally, my best friend growing up in South Philly, my best friend from college, both of their birthdays on St. Patrick's Day. Nice, so it's always a good, fun time. Got that Irish Catholic in me for sure. Originally from Grace Ferry section of Philadelphia, nice. Super duper Irish Catholic there.
You got plenty of time to get ready.
Yeah, it's in my blood. It's in my blood for sure.
He'll have a green outfit. You see, that's the beauty of St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah, I got a green shirt on. I actually wore this shirt on St. Patrick's Day this year. A little green striped shirt.
Asked. Now you understand.
Yeah,
Shamus, great job. Thanks for hopping on with us today, bud. We'll get you back up soon enough.
Thanks, guys. Have a great weekend.
All right.